Welcome to the Better Two podcast. I'm your host, Donna. Today's guest is Richard Sparks. You may remember him from last year when he released his book, New Rock, New Roll. Well, this time he's back to discuss his new book, New Rock, New Realm. And well, we talk about that and we talk about writing and a lot of other stuff, including Jack Black. So tune in. Welcome back, Richard. How are you today?
I'm very well, Donna. How's yourself?
I'm good. Are you in London? Or are you in Los Angeles today?
I'm in Los Angeles, even though I've got well, it's a fake fire with real gas, real flames. So
It looks cozy.
it's,
La-
it's nice. It's cold here today, actually. It's probably, you know, that's why I'm huddled up in the heat.
So, I mean, here where I'm at, it's actually warmer than usual. We're close to 50 today.
Oh, well, we must be about the same.
Yeah.
So,
For me,
uh,
that's like, oh, I'm gonna go get my shorts on and we'll be all okay today. So, yeah, because
well, where are you?
I'm outside of
In New
Chicago,
York?
about 80
Okay.
miles outside of Chicago.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
that's winter, proper winter up there.
Yeah, considering I'm about like maybe 5 miles from Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
nice part of the world.
So, last time we talked, you were in London. Now you're in Los Angeles. That's why I was curious as to ask you where you were.
I flit about. Yeah.
So you just released the sequel to your last book. So let's go right into your new book and talk about that.
Well, it's really the adventures continue now that our hero and his merry crew are established in this new world where they found themselves, much to their surprise, and they've picked up one local inhabitant along the way to be part of the crew. Next thing they managed to survive the last problem that was facing them and save the realm in the process. Now they've got to go off somewhere else and do something else. So it's called New Rock, New Realm as opposed to New Rock, New Roll. So yes, they're off. A mysterious ghost ship arrives and carries them off. They think they're off to do something heroic and save some poor person who's in trouble. But yes, it turns out that um, quite a lot of surprises, and it gets much worse before they know it.
Well, when a ship shows up out of nowhere, you really just got to go, Is this really the right thing?" But,
Yep, yeah,
sometimes.
yes. Got to see what's at the end. Well, there was a message on board for them, so they realized anyway. It's that's where it all starts, but it takes them off into a new series of adventures. I mean, the whole series is just one adventure after another, which is
Well,
like history, isn't it? One damn thing after another.
exactly. It's like history. It's like a video game, which that's exactly what you started. That's what led you to do this. And you're currently writing which book? I saw
I'm in
online.
number five.
That's what
I'm
I
in
thought.
book five. I got three and four done, which is nice. My editor, Leslie Robin, who's a bit of a star in the fantasy editing world, is going through the developmental edit on that at the moment. And we're very much in step on the way we think about it. But she's really good at encouraging me to go for more and do this and bring this scene more to life. And, she's not just all about cutting things down. So she's doing that. Book four's then on the runway. Book five is being a bit sticky at the moment, but sometimes it's like that. I mean, I just got very, very inspired right at the beginning, and book one flew out in 2 months. It was extraordinary. And then there was, a great deal of editing and re-editing and rethinking. But I had the structure. The most important thing is to have your spine, your structure of the story, and then you're okay. Then the real work starts, the fun. You can exploit it. Uh,
Yes.
the moment book five is being a little bit, yeah, but we'll get there.
Sometimes as a writer, you just get stuck, and it's like no matter if you sit down to write, it just doesn't come.
Yeah,
It
yeah, I
just,
know. And
I
you have
know.
to sort of figure out what that means and talk to other people who've been through it and do the things that the other great writers, something like Philip Pullman says, you said you'd write 500 words a day, just sit down and write them, which is great advice. On the other hand, my wrinkle on that is you look, don't panic. You can always just write your 500 words a day, and if they're no good, you can throw them away. And at least you've tried, and you might find a germ in there. There was book three has a uh, really quite involved puzzle in the middle of it. And that took a lot of thinking out. And I must have thrown away 200 or 300 pages in that one before the story completely revealed itself. Uh, But that I knew that never felt sticky. I quite often felt I'm not getting right here. Well, let's try that. But I never felt that it was trudging along.
Well, I have to,
Which yeah,
I have to ask. I mean, when you get rid of stuff, when I get rid of stuff, because I'll have my friends that started knowing when I would share my writing, they'd be like, "Well, don't throw that stuff away." I'm like, "I don't." I now with being on the computer, I mean, I have a box full of my writing from the '80s when I was using a typewriter or a notebook. And now it's like I'll just move it to another file, and if I need that for another story, then I have it for another story. So do you actually get rid of it, or do you put it somewhere else in case you need it for something else?
well, it's in an earlier file. I mean, I go along. I construct my books in files of 5 chapters at a time. So each, part one is the first 5 chapters. Part two is the next. So part one, version one, will have originals in it, and part one, version two, will have changes in it. So it's all there if I need to find it. But one of the great notes on this I got when I was writing a musical in London with Albert Marr, who's a legend on Broadway. He created Man of La Mancha and Kismet. He's the creating director. And the director in musicals is the person that everyone reports to, the lyricist, the book writer, the musician. Everyone reports to the director, and he builds the show, which I didn't know, but I learned from working with Albie. And he once said to me something that was a great, it's a fun note. We didn't have a lyricist. It was an emergency. So I said, well, I love writing lyrics. I can write lyrics. And he sort of, oh God, another amateur who thinks he can do it. It's experienced old New York lizard. Anyway, luckily the first lyric I gave him was okay. It was a comic one. And I think possibly the second too. And I rather liked the third one I took him. I went in because he'd been rehearsing all day in the evening, and he'd pour a ferocious martini. And I gave him the script. I could still see him looking at it, sort of like that, not a flicker in his face, and going, well, this is fine, but it's for entirely the wrong show. Black belt note. Great. Okay. Lyrics fine. Wrong. Doesn't fit. So what you're writing doesn't fit in that story. In other words, that story doesn't need it. Maybe another story does.
Exactly.
When I've worked with less experienced actors as a script editor, which I've done a lot, sometimes you get the note, which you should grow out of pretty quickly if you're a writer, when the editor says to you, why is this there? And the writer says, well, because I like it. You say, yeah, well, okay, you do, but the story doesn't like it. It doesn't, if you like it, put it in a story where it fits. So save it by all means and save it, but make sure that what that thing fits with the story. That's what they mean by kill your darlings.
Well, I with one of my books, I borrowed because I was on a time crunch. I was doing a contest and I was on a
Right.
time crunch. So I borrowed from this story I had been working on for 20 years. I took and moved pieces and everything. And everybody says about that book, it's one of those books you can't put down and that everything's seamless. And
Yeah,
I mean, I would
possibly.
tell my friends, and I'm like, yeah, but I borrowed this and this and this from this. You can't
Well, why,
tell.
why on earth should you know what's going on as the writer? There's no reason why you should, because it's not all cerebral. It's not all intellectual. Bertrand Russell said something I find fascinating, because he was a great mathematician as well as a great philosopher, and he said that when had a challenge that he needed to fix, a problem, he would work really hard on it for 48 hours, then put it away. And then 6 months later, when he had to come and do the symposium or the presentation, just before it, the answer would pop out.
Of course.
And he said, it's as if work has been, it is as if orders had been given for the work to proceed underground. It's absolutely brilliant. So
Hmm.
what happened in the case of your book was that you were working on it without knowing it. And
Yeah.
that's the best kind, because that comes out of the same area of things that, like what we call inspiration,
Hmm.
is the more than just the ego up here, more than just the brain.
Well, it's like that moment when somebody asks you something and suddenly your mind goes completely blank. And then hours later, when you're not thinking about it at all, the answer comes to you.
Yes, 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 yes. I'm like l'esprit d'escalier, as the French say. When you think of the perfect reply to somebody who said something witty and perhaps cutting, and on the way downstairs and on the staircase, you get that moment of, oh, I should have said that.
Mhm.
That would have been brilliant. Yeah, it's there's a lot more going on in our brains than just our consciousness.
Oh yeah, yeah. Your subconscious has so much going on, yet our ego kind of keeps it in check.
I
And
was,
go
yeah,
ahead.
go.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was fascinated to learn something quite recently about the fact that not everything that is what we think of ourselves is stored in the brain. It's stored in other organs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a thing called organ, and somebody ought to write this as a horror story or as a science fiction thing. There's a thing called organ memory, where
Mm-hmm.
people who've had organs transplanted into them change personality in some way. I mean, somebody might be gay and then they get the liver from somebody who isn't and they turn straight. Or I mean, simple. That's a simple answer. But people who've been nervous about one thing become brave, or they become vegetarians suddenly, simply because they've had an organ transplant,
Well,
which
study.
seems to suggest there's something in the organ itself that is part of the personality that you now have assimilated into yours,
It's
possibly.
not just your organs though, because I suffered an injury and I went to physical therapy and now I'm studying Reiki. And both physical therapy and Reiki, they talk about how in going to a massage therapist, they talk about the fact that there's certain muscles that will hold trauma and they will
Oh,
hold trauma and
wow.
we don't think about that. We think, oh, it's all up in here. No, your
Yeah,
body holds on to that trauma. That's what creates that inflammation response besides the outside toxicity of the world. But your body, like there's certain muscles that will be a response to your relationship with your
yeah,
mother. It's very
yeah.
weird, but nobody
No, well,
talks
I
about it.
mean, what about muscle memory? You talk about
Hmm.
that if you're studying a sport, learning something like, I don't know, what a golf swing or
Hmm.
something. That is something that is unnatural at first, but once you rehearse it and hone the thing, it becomes more automatic, and it's what they call muscle memory. So I think it must be the same general idea.
Well, my father-in-law told me he was in the Navy at the time, and he told me a story about how him and his friends went out and got crocked. The wife was with him and the other guy's wife was with him and he never really drank a lot, but he got crocked and they're on the base and muscle memory made him drive to the ship, not to the house but to the ship, because he was so used to getting on the base and then driving to the ship. So muscle memory still functions even when that's when your subconscious is going along, okay, this is where we go.
Yeah, fascinating. I mean, there's this is a whole big topic. I mean, how about automatic pilot when you're driving along and you're just not even thinking about it?
Hmm.
Your mind is off doing other things and clicks in and out.
Well, in speaking to you as a creative, I mean, the fact is sometimes we can be here in the mundane having a conversation with somebody or working or reading or whatever, and then we have the idea, the creative process in our head of going, oh, well, you could work on this with this character or whatever. Meantime, you're trying to have a conversation with somebody else, but your mind is over here playing out your story. As a creative, I think there's a lot more chatter than people that aren't necessarily creative.
Yeah, well, there's possibly I would if maybe I wouldn't like to put us in a higher bracket than people who
Oh,
are creative.
I'm not
Yeah,
trying to do that. It's just when I talk to a lot of people when I do readings and stuff, they're like, well, and I'm meaning reading cards or stuff like that. They're like, I'm not creative. So I don't think that everybody has that. They have other things going on in their mind,
yeah. Why should we
but
all be the same? Of course. Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
but but writers typically they'll be sitting there and then suddenly one of their characters will decide to come in and say,
Yeah.
"Hi, how are you doing?" And you're like, "What the hell? I'm here
Yeah,
now."
yeah. I mean, that's why I always carry a notebook with me. I mean,
Mhm.
well, this is I got a yellow one today, but there's always a notebook in my pocket and one upstairs by the bed, because if the idea comes and you don't write it down, it disappears.
Mhm.
And you've got to be open to letting as you said, your characters suddenly appear. I mean, all the characters in my books popped up out of nowhere.
Mhm.
Even the narrator at the beginning, who changed, by the way, from his first iteration. And then people turned up and said things. And you go, oh, that seems to be happening,
Mhm.
and became things. So you've got to be responsible. If you try and steer that ship too hard, it'll end up as a very small ship. As I
It'll
suppose
dry
Bill
dock.
puts it. What do you say?
It'll dry dock.
Yeah, but I'm perhaps steering is perhaps to build it as well. It's building and steering. And yes, you have to be open and responsive, and ideas come out of the world. Because you're in tune to them in some way.
Hmm.
You might be working on something, and you notice things that are things to do with it, and you don't notice all the things that aren't.
Right.
I mean, there's plenty of stuff we don't notice every day, but occasionally you go, oh, that really fits.
Mm-hmm. And that's the interesting thing is when things that, the other day I was talking to my friend before I went and took my Reiki class about Russian nesting dolls. Okay. Don't know why this came up, but we were just mentioning Russian nesting dolls. So we're in class and somebody suddenly says, "Yes, this is kind of like, what you're explaining about the aura situation. That's kind of like Russian nesting dolls." Don't know
Okay.
why, but okay. So twice
Well,
it's
two people,
being
it possibly is. That might be a very good metaphor for describing it.
it is, but I mean it was
Similarly,
weird
and like,
because
yes, sorry.
it was weird because we brought it up earlier and then here it is being presented again.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's where that line goes through our relationships and situations because sometimes I don't think we realize that. And as a sci-fi author, I'm sure you can see this. You can see the string that connects things that something may be brought up earlier that will become
Mm.
relevant later on. It doesn't make any sense when it initially is presented, but later on it does.
Very true. And this is goes back again to the point, the idea of coincidence, which is coincidence is simply what you notice. There are coincidences happening all the time that you don't notice. And then people say, I mean, for example, religions are full of coincidences cropping up, and people say, oh, it must be a higher power or spiritual power because this happened. It's not a causal relationship necessarily. I mean, I'm not going to pick a particular example because there's no point, don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but you can find it in any, mythology, Greek mythology, Norse mythology. Things are attributed to higher powers because you notice, like the Greeks were very into omens. So they would see an owl fly west and they say, oh, that's Athena saying us we must go that way because Athena had the owl as a sacred thing. But they were noticing it. Now,
Right.
a 16th, 17th century American Puritan seeing that same owl would have thought, oh, owl,
Hmm.
wouldn't have wouldn't have attributed any importance to it. So it's what we read into situations that makes coincidences this big thing that people tend to possibly exaggerate or at least definitely notice and pay attention to.
I agree. I agree. So when you are sitting down to, like right now, you said you're stuck. After book five, since it's becoming a process where it's coming a little bit harder to you to write, is there a book six planned or is this going to be the last book of the series?
Well, I think in a way that book four is the last book in the series and book five is the sequels starting.
Okay.
Although it's still a continuation. But one of my test readers is a Emmy-winning producer here in Los Angeles, and I said to him, because he's read all four books, and he said, "Have book five coming alone?" I said, "I think the series is kind of complete in the end of book four. Is that? I'm a bit worried about that." And he said, "I love it when a series ends." And I thought about that, and I thought, "You are right, sir." Because look at things that have unsatisfactorily ended or have been dragged on too long or who've jumped the shark.
Hmm.
We can get named many, many episodes, or like especially in Hollywood where they drag things out
Oh, yeah.
far too long and try and overexploit them. The Lord of the Rings is three books. Fine, finished, done. End of. I mean, of course, you're left wanting more, which is a good thing, but to keep it going uh, in spite of itself would have been a mistake. And so I think that book six is actually going to be a little easier
Okay.
because I think it'll be more of a fresh start. But this one is, I mean, it's very funny what's happening, but it's tightening me up in in what the story needs to do.
Right.
It's I've got about a third of it done, and it should be okay. I mean, it's a nice reversal of a trope that is used in fiction all the time. Um, so I would hope to finish it by the end of 2025, which is kind of like twice as long as the last book took.
So is there any plans for turning this into a television series or a movie?
Well, I've sold the film rights to an independent producer in England who is very keen on it, and I've written the script. So it's sitting there. I mean, they've now got to do their magic and get it all together with budget and all that. But he had a fun meeting. I was in London in November, and we had lunch, and he said, I met this company the other day. It's a very big special effects company." And they were talking about something else. And he said, "What are you looking for?" And they said, we're really looking for something we can do world building. We want a whole new world that we can create with adventures and stories and creatures. And he said, well, I think I have the very thing for you. So he sent the script into them and we'll see. But it must have been fun to have that moment of a conversation where somebody says, we're looking for this. And you think, actually, this sounds right up your street and really mean it.
Yeah.
I mean, most of these things never come to anything, but it's there if it needs to be. And it's actually it's very cinematic and action packed and visual. And part of the experience of 40 years of adapting scripts as well as writing them is it took no time at all to write. The book itself is 450 pages ish, and the script is 120 pages on the
Nice.
121, which is exactly 2 hours. At the beginning, I thought it would be a TV series because there's so much happening in it. But he said people in streaming, the world's changed. The people don't want long series to wallow in quite the way they did. They want a 2 hour action series, 2 hour action film. And so I said, okay, well, let's try and see if I can do it like that. But every project's got to be different.
I mean, right now that's the way it is. Maybe 5 years from now it changes again. I
Yeah.
mean, to be honest, so when Game of Thrones came out years ago, my husband and I started to watch the first couple episodes and it was like, oh, this will never go anywhere. Of course it did, but it was just at the time we're like, this is not going to go anywhere. So I finally this month I decided, well, you know what? I got HBO for a short amount of time. I might as well try watching Game of Thrones. And I did. I watched the whole thing and it wasn't bad, but it was like I preferred honestly binging it, and I'm like, man, you guys had to wait like a week, sometimes longer, to get to the next. And I remember, I mean, I've watched shows. I'm older.
It was
I've
fun.
I've
It was a
watched those
water
whole.
cooler show. It was
Yes,
the show you talk about on Monday morning, and
yeah.
waiting a week was fine. I mean, it was a date night for my wife and me. We definitely used to watch it every Sunday, and it was great. I mean, unfortunately, again, that's got the whole thing with the going on too long in the endings problem.
Hmm.
And not as the books. The books are amazing, and I can't wait to read everything else that he writes. He's a fantastically good writer. Um, but the series did get lost with a very simple uh, script writing problem. I'm not saying that the answer to it was easy, but the script writing problem, as with everything, is set up and payoff.
Hmm.
And if they want the series to pay off with Daenerys going mad, well, we've been rooting for her for 12 years. You can't just do that out of nowhere in one show. Set it
Right.
up better so that, like, for example, what's that thing? The gremlins or something. They're perfectly safe little creatures, but if you put water on them, they turn
Yes.
into
Yes.
right. Okay, well, do something simple like that. The Daenerys is perfectly sane unless somebody gives her a cup of Starbucks coffee, as in one, as in one
Right.
scene. But it's something like that's a cheesy answer. But do you see what I mean? Set it up with something that says there, this tips her over the edge, then it goes on. And I thought it was actually wrong to want that ending because they just wanted the dramatic picture of the dragon burning the throne and carrying off the dead body and the broken-hearted hero who had to kill her going off into this. It's all nah. Don't believe any of this.
No,
So,
it lacked.
well, it was just not thought out properly, and as I said, not set up and not paid off. Every piece of story structure is to do with that. Uh, the rest is the fun and the details. But if you don't have the setup right, then the payoff can never work.
No. And that's the thing. It's like people when you rush to write a book, if you don't really, I mean, even as a pantser, okay, I'm a pantser. Yes, I can plot. I can sit there and plot all day. But 10 to 1, even if I plot, the pantser aspect will come in and I will run off until never land and write whatever. But I still have to go back and review everything and make sure it makes sense. Why is this happening and why is this happening? You can't just go, okay, yeah, this sounds great. I'm just going to end the book this way.
Absolutely. It's not a linear process writing a book. It's a circular process. You go round and round and round. Pantsing is definitely the best way to write once it's working. You sit down and you write and out it flows and characters appear and this is it. In your 500 words a day. I'm not saying,
Hmm.
something happens. Great. I'll stop there. Oh, good. Yes. But what you also need to do is learn how to construct an outline. And the easiest way to do it is when you're going along. Look at what you've already written. You've written 5 chapters. Well, go over here and write an outline of 2 lines per chapter saying Frodo gets a ring, Frodo goes off to Burma, chapter 2. Frodo gets attacked by Black Riders in a pub, whatever.
Hmm.
So there you've got your structure, building. And then if you've got any sense as a writer, the first thing you do once you've had your idea, how does this land? Figure
Hmm.
out the ending. And the ending doesn't have to be the ending of the events. It just has to be, where does the book land? What does it mean? What's the explanation? That
Right.
was the first thing I thought of in New Rock, New Roll when we had this extraordinary idea cropped up. We, the royal we, me and my hero. Okay, there needs to be an explanation for this happening. With no explanation, it may be fun, but it's not going to swim. It's not going to hold water. Well, swim and hold water at the same time. Sorry, but
I know what you mean.
so I needed to figure out what's the explanation for all this,
Right.
which is pretty easy. So that comes at the end of the book, and then we're set up for the following adventures. But once you've got that ending, that where it lands, then you've got 400 pages to play with yourself, if you see what I mean. You can
Hmm.
go in any direction, backwards, forwards, set up your traps, your red herrings, send the audience off. Yes, the answer's over there. Off we go. And at the end, they go, oh, of course. Yeah, you got me.
Hmm.
And they love that. They love being surprised. And
It's
they go, oh, yeah, now it all makes sense. But they trust you. If they trust the author's voice as you go along, then that armchair ride is really satisfactory. And in the good adventure books that I've read, you're just off in heaven. And it's very important for the writer to do all the work so that the reader doesn't have to do any except just enjoy themselves.
and that's the same whether it be books or TV, because as a writer, I have that problem of I have figured out what's coming, where it's this is going and how it's going to play out, and then you're sitting there going, and I would sit there with my husband when he was alive and was like, yeah, he's the killer. And he's like, how do you know that? I'm like, because this and this.
Well, you have to know. I mean, this is the very best example you could possibly give a writer is if you are a writer of a whodunit, you've got to know the killer long before the audience does. Otherwise,
Mhm.
you're just bumbling along with them, going, it could be Colonel Mustard in the library with the shovel. It could be Miss Scarlet with the toothbrush in the spaceship. I mean, you've got to know. Then
Mhm.
you set up your red herrings and you fool your audience. I mean, Agatha Christie, God bless her, was a tremendous cheat in a lot of her writings. That's her plotting, but she's still. I mean, everything still works. But you just set it up, pay it off, figure out what you're doing, and then. But it's just the same as rewriting. Once you've got your plot, once you've got your first draft done, going back and rewriting it and polishing it is not lack of inspiration. It's not lack of pantsing. It's making more of this thing that you're doing. So yes, I agree with you. I always write sort of forging ahead, wondering where I'm going, because you never know what you're going to write, do you? Nobody's written it yet. But
Well,
once you've written it yet, you can say, okay, now let's fix it.
well, like when I did the contest, the only requirement besides word count was it has to have a happy ending or a
Oh,
happy for now. Okay, so the parameters are I can do whatever I want. I have to write 90,000 words and it has to
oh,
have a happy ending.
90,000. Whoa.
It was a romance novel. It was, they're not a lot of hardcore. Granted, I ended up not entering the contest because there was a clause in the contract that I did not like, and I thought, well, this is opening me up so you can just steal my stuff. So I didn't do it. So I ended up putting more stuff in, and the book is a little bit longer, but people were satisfied with it, and it got good reviews, and it's the best received book I have. So,
You never know how you're going to get there. It's exactly
no,
like writing a book.
exactly.
As they
So,
say in Ireland, if I wanted to get to Tipperary, I wouldn't start from here.
so I want to ask you something off the topic of writing, which is you play banjo?
I do, yeah. Well, actually, I don't have one out at the moment, thank God. Otherwise, you'd make me play it. I have really been playing hardly any since, well, the whole of 2024. Since I've been so into writing these books. I mean, I used to go and play with a friend and really lessons. He's a very, very good player. So I'd sit there and pay him $60 an hour and we'd play together and he'd teach me new stuff. Well, but yeah, basically lessons, but um, a lot of it was jamming, just playing songs and having a good time. But I don't do that anymore. No, I don't know why. I'm
Well,
just sort of locked into the new rock series. But
what
I
made
do like the banjo. It's very freeing.
what made you decide I want to play the banjo? I mean, most people are like, I'm going to play the guitar or I'm going to play the piano. What made you decide I want to play the banjo?
Jeff Beck.
Okay.
I came back from the pub one evening in London, in my first house in Brixton, South London, turned on the TV, and there was Jeff Beck being interviewed. I thought, oh, great, because he's an amazing guitar
Hmm.
player. And this was, early 70s, no, late 70s, early 80s, maybe. And somebody said to him, it was a really kind of flattering interview, and it was getting a little bit oily for me. And the interviewer said, "So you've done everything, Jeff. What's next for you?" And Jeff said, "Well, I don't know, the banjo." And it was a joke. He was putting the banjo down, and I thought, when I remember Bonnie and Clyde, I remember that Foggy Mountain breakdown. That doesn't sound easy. This was a little patronizing of him. So, and then the next day I was going for my daily run around Clapham Common, and there was a junk shop in those days on the corner, and there was a banjo hanging in it. So I thought, aha, like you were saying, what was your example earlier? Russian nesting dolls.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I thought, oh, right. Yeah, why not? And I just got married, and the married man needs a hobby. So I went back a couple of days later, and it had gone. So I said, oh, what else have you got? And he said, well, I got a bagpipe chaunter. So I picked up the bagpipe chaunter, went home and played that for a bit, and got some frosty looks from my new wife, and basically thought this isn't for me. I'd played the trumpet before. I don't like blowing instruments. I'd rather be able to play with my fingers. So I went back to the shop and said, no, this isn't for me. And where would I buy a banjo? And he said, you need to go to a shop in London called All Bang and Strum It, believe it or not, which All Bang and Strum It. So I went to All Bang and Strum It. They didn't have any. And they said, oh, you need to go to John Alvey Turner. So I went up these flights of stairs in Bloomsbury, and there was a room at the top, and I opened in the walls of musical instruments, very small place, and shut the door behind. There's a poster of Billy Connolly on the door, who's a friend or acquaintance in the banjo world now, and be a hero of mine. He's a great comic writer and performer. There's nobody in the room, and then those plastic curtains that used to hang in Chinese restaurants.
Hmm.
They sort of parted, and a bearded face shoved itself out and said, "Can I help you?" And I said, "I'm thinking of taking up the banjo." And he said, "What a sensible fellow!" At that point, I was in. So I bought a book, took it home, studied it, thought I can do this, and went back next week and bought my first banjo, and have been getting worse at it ever since.
And I saw that you had your banjo and Jack Black had a guitar.
Yeah, Jack. Well, I was lucky enough to direct him in Stravinsky's The Soldier's Tale for the Young Musicians Foundation here, Musicians Foundation, some years ago, and he was absolutely delightful. He couldn't have been sweeter to everybody. This was a voluntary. We all gave our time for it, and the kids in the orchestra loved him. He would have selfies with everyone. Uh, Never rushed off, and he couldn't have been easier to work with or more fun. Just a nicer guy. And he just happened to be in this very room as we were taking a break from rehearsals when Michael Lerner, who was, I think he got an Oscar nomination for Barton Fink playing the MGM boss type character. He was the third person. He's playing the devil.
Okay.
And he whipped out his camera and took that shot of us.
Nice.
So he sent it to me. Yeah, Jack, I'm very fond of him. He's
Well,
a remarkable man.
and he has good comedic timing, and I'm sure that part of the whole wild man thing is a persona. And I mean, I'm sure he has a little bit of a hyperactive quality, but I'm also sure that sometimes the over the top is that persona.
Well, I think he's actually quite a lot more adaptable as an actor than people realize. He played a sort of fake, uh, creepy funeral director in one film, rather straight. Can't remember what it was, which was very good performance. So he's not just a clown. I mean, his mum is a physicist, very eminent,
Okay.
with some kind of astrophysics or space physics or something. I've talked, well, she was there in rehearsals, so I got to chat with her a bit. Now, he's very, very bright, Um, I yeah, but the thing is, he loves to be a clown, and
Right.
his first love is music. He'd much rather be a music star than an actor. I think he may have even gone back to that. Um,
He did. He did
yeah,
recently. He was on tour sometime earlier this year.
yeah.
Excuse me. We,
Uh,
my friend,
he's a good one. He's a good guy.
I'm sure my friend and I were watching Love Actually, and she had seen it before I had, and she's like, when Rowan Atkinson's come on, she's like, and you're talking to Richard this week, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, yes, I am, because she had remembered the story, and he was more subdued in that role, but it was still him.
Again, Rowan. Well, apart from the fact that Rowan is blisteringly original, great talent of our time, he's actually quite a lot more. Uh, he's less range bound than he might appear. I mean, I was talking with John Lloyd in London last month, who produced Blackadder and Spitting Image and Not the 9 O'Clock News, which was Rowan's big start. Um, and he was talking about how, sometimes Rowan goes like too far in something. He said, Man versus Bee is just Rowan pulling faces for 20 minutes. I haven't seen it, but when Rowan's fits the part and fits the job and stuff, there's nobody like him.
Mm-mm.
One of our contemporaries at the beginning, when Rowan was still a student, people were saying this is the new Peter Sellers. And my friend Peter Wilson, who I used to do comic sketches with as a student, said, I think Rowan's had a more distinguished career than Peter Sellers. If you look at the variety, especially with Maigret recently, it's a
Yeah.
serious part. Um, no, he's a generational talent.
Hey,
And yeah, he
well,
was, yeah, come on.
no, go ahead.
No, I just, he can be subdued, as
I,
is.
I, I was just gonna say about Peter Sellers. I mean, I know who Peter Sellers was, but I'm thinking that past my generation, I don't think a lot of people do because he died when I was younger. So I'm
Yeah,
not sure how many people really know who Peter Sellers is anymore, which is
well,
unfortunate.
yeah, people move on. I mean, who remembers, I don't know, Fatty Arbuckle or Laurel and Hardy or, a lot of the great comedians, especially the vaudeville musical comedians
Yeah.
who weren't recorded, they're forgotten. But fame isn't permanent for everyone.
No, and I think here's the interesting thing is so I'm Gen X basically, and I came up with when we didn't have the internet necessarily. We had the internet when I was in my 20s, not when I was younger. So we had, when AMC was on, it was all old movies. It wasn't original programming. So
Tolkien.
I got to see that, and your local television channels were running Shirley Temple movies, Andy Hardy movies with Judy Garland and Andy Rooney or Mickey Rooney. And, there was all these older TV shows that were still being shown to us.
Yeah.
And so we had the Three Stooges, we had Laurel and Hardy. Where
Yeah.
now, because we have so much content, that gets lost.
Yeah, you're very right about that. I mean, people tend to consume things in smaller bites now rather than, for example, get into, oh, wow. We didn't have, what's that, Get Smart in England when I was growing up.
Hmm.
So I saw it, a generation later on TV when I moved over here. And I couldn't believe what fun it was.
Hmm.
But I doubt if anyone now would necessarily sit through the whole of Get Smart just by accident, the
No.
way we did. No, I think we were lucky not to have the internet. I think it's Neil deGrasse Tyson is of the opinion that we'll all get bored of the internet because most of the stuff up there is just fake. It's just rubbish. And he says we're going to grow out of it. Well, he's a very wise man, so I hope he's right. But
Well,
yeah, it's useful, but you can waste your time.
if I
I
want,
was,
go ahead.
sorry,
No, go ahead.
well, I was at a conference in Worldcon, the big fantasy world science fiction conference in Glasgow, and I was in a panel, not on it. I was in the background because I like to go to lots of panels and see what other people have learned from other writers and whatever panelists. Next to me, there was a boy who couldn't be more than 20, and he was on his phone like this the whole time. Just went no. He never once looked up at the stage. Then the only thing that happened is there was a space moved up, so he moved us another space to be further away from me, so I have more space. And just that, it's kind of heartbreaking.
Hmm.
Now, possibly there are a number of people in the science fiction and fantasy community who are neurodivergent. So he may have been autistic or Asperger's or have some kind of mental condition that this suits his style. But even so, he's not interfacing with real people, if interfacing is the correct word. Um, so and he wasn't even listening. He was just flicking, watching, listening, no sound, nothing.
Well, I think that's one of the things nowadays is that we get so much content with our phones, with other things going on. It's like, as we were talking about earlier about the characters coming to us. While as a creator we'll have characters coming to us, but we also have all the distractions now of, well, wait a second, I need to check on this. Wait, oh, I know that actor. Let me look that up on my phone while you're watching a movie. My husband, yes, I'm guilty of that. My husband's like, you're not watching the movie. I'm like, I can tell you what's going on. And I could, but it would drive him nuts because he's like, how do you do that? He's like, you're not paying attention. I'm like, yes, I am. And some people are capable of doing that, and as I'm getting older I'm not as capable of doing that, but 10,
Yeah,
15 years ago I was very capable of doing that. But I think what happens is we get rewired. Our brains
yes,
get rewired from all the bombardment.
but multitasking doesn't necessarily mean you're multitasking both things at 100%. I think that's impossible.
No, it is
So,
impossible.
for example, it's like difficult works of literature. I studied literature at university, and some of the things I had to read were a struggle, difficult, especially if they were in Anglo-Saxon, Old English, and you have to kind of learn a vaguely new language. Or if you're comparing with European literature and you want to consult the originals, and my French is not that good and my German's adequate was then, so you're having to work to read. It's rewarding. Now I don't work to read. I only read stuff that is no work, where the writer's done all the hard work. That's possibly because I'm older and I'm not doing it for a degree, but I think it's also because I believe that the writer should do all the work. And once you make the reader trust you and you take them on a ride, that's the best thing you can do for them. That's the reward for their $20.
Oh, yeah.
Mm.
And I think that's even with a movie. It's like I watched a movie yesterday with Liam Neeson, and Liam Neeson's movies, they're somewhat predictable at times. We're not going to say they're not. But this movie it just didn't work. It was, while it should have been good, it wasn't. And it was basically his Taken movies, but not Taken. And he was stuck in a car and he couldn't get out of the car because of a bomb.
Oh
And
dear.
and his family's in the car, his kids are in the car, and whoever did the lighting and the makeup did no favors to him. And it didn't work because it seemed contrived. It didn't
Too
seem
high concept.
legit.
Yeah. Well, it worked with the Keanu Reeves film, didn't it? Keanu, whatever he is,
Yes.
with Sandra Bullock, was it?
Yeah,
Where they stuck
speed.
in a bus that had to go at a certain speed.
hmm
But yeah, sometimes these high concepts don't have the strength to carry the weight for 4 hours. But on predictable Liam Neeson movies, I cannot predict what Naked Gun's going to be like with him in the Leslie Nielsen part.
No,
I think
no.
I think it'll be hysterical.
It should be
I
pretty funny.
because have you seen his little short films he makes for his
Mm-mm.
audition to be Santa Claus?
No,
Oh, it's great. He's auditioning to be a mall Santa,
I'll have
and
to
he's
look it
reading the
up.
script. And the director's saying, "Well, you're not doing this." He said, "We are, but they've been naughty, so they need to be punished." And so it's just he does it beautifully. Do watch it.
I
It's
will
only
check that
five
out.
minutes. You can concentrate on five minutes. I'm sure you've got 5 minutes
I,
in
I
you.
have I have longer attention span than 5 minutes. I try to TikTok gets on my nerves because it's like it's addictive, and I can see the addiction there where you can just get stuck doom scrolling, and it's like I don't want to do that. So
I've never I never tried it.
I don't
I
really
never.
get on it because of that, because I know that that's what it just turns into. It's like I don't want to do that. One movie, and this is not Liam Neeson, it's Gerard Butler, is Law Abiding Citizen. It's an older movie, but there was enough twists and turns in it to make you stop and go, wait a second, like Primal Fear and Richard Gere. Those movies that make you think I enjoy because it's that escape, it's that ride you're on.
Yeah, look, when I say the writer should do all the work for you, I don't mean that you do nothing.
I
You
know.
you get absorbed in it. I mean, one of the things that are fun in games, role-playing games, is the puzzles you come up against, the problems you've got to solve. You've got to figure out how to get out of this or how to work the magic doors or whatever. In a book, you can do the same. You can set puzzles for people. And I give mysterious verses and stuff. that go on, and then you think, oh, well, the answer is obviously there. As the reader, I wonder what that means. I can see what it says, and I trust that the hero is going to figure it out. Or you can, and then you go along and you develop bits and bits and bits, and that's definitely absorbs the mind,
Oh, yeah.
and that's what I love in a book when you get something that gives you a, whoa, yeah, I can see that. Like Ready Player One. Did you read that book?
No, I did not.
The book is excellent. The film was dreadful. That had nothing to do with the book. Sad to say. Yeah, it's a perfectly good film, I suppose. But because I was a big fan of the original book, I thought, well, there's nothing to do with. They've got nothing in common except the title. But the thing about it is, it's so well structured. You have to, three hidden keys open three secret gates. Okay, I've got to find three keys and three gates, and the challenge, and
Hmm.
and you also had to go back to understand 80s culture in order to solve what was happening in 2040. So it's really, really nicely plotted. But you had puzzles to work out. You go, oh, what does this mean? Here's the next, here's the next mysterious verse that you discover after the first bit has been solved. Oh, okay. How does this work out? And you look and think, and well, what could that possibly mean? At the same time as the hero's thinking, what could this possibly mean? And together you find out eventually.
Well,
That's
I think
fun. All that.
one of the earliest games that I really liked playing was Zelda, because
Yeah,
yes, you were on a quest and you had to solve puzzles, and it
yeah.
was all those little pieces.
But
So that was kind of important.
especially with you writing whodunits,
Hmm.
exactly
And
what
I,
it is.
and I was going to say one thing, because we were talking about this earlier about how TV series versus movie, and the Interview with the Vampire. When you look at the movie, it is what it is. The movie was okay. Did it stay true to the book? Yeah, sort of.
Or to be better than Ready Player One did.
Yes, yes. And the firm stayed somewhat true to the book, but not completely. And I was a little disappointed, like you. But so, Interview with the Vampire, the movie, it was pretty good. But I like what they've done with the series. And yes, they've taken some liberties with the series, but it's given it a different feel. It's given it a more modern feel.
Interesting. I haven't.
And
Is it who's in it? What's it on?
it's on AMC, and
Right.
it's out for 2 seasons now. And they play different tropes. And what's interesting is, so in the original book, you have, the in the movie, you have Charlie or Christian Slater sitting there, being the reporter, taking the notes, having the story. However, in this series, it's set in modern times,
Right.
but they show Louis sitting down with the same reporter back in the 70s.
Okay. 1870s,
No,
1970s.
1970s, the 1970s. So
Oh,
you know that they had this connection, but that came more in season two. So it kind of moves around in a lot of moving pieces, and there's more detail.
yeah.
So I appreciate the fact that they've changed a little, but they're still staying pretty close to what it is or what the
Oh,
book was.
I mean, what is it about vampires that fascinates people? And they've just done a new Nosferatu with there was a Bill Skarsgård and Willem Dafoe and Lily Rose Depp, I think her name is.
Hmm.
Uh, why are vampires so fascinating? Because I find them vaguely creepy and irritating.
The very first thing I ever published was two vampire short stories, and the one that I actually won I did win the Vicious Seduction contest because I wrote a vampire that was a dominatrix. That's how the book starts off, and then it goes off into other things. But the whole reason she was a dominatrix was because, well, she has these people, these deviants come in that don't. She makes sure they don't have a family, and then she can kill them off, and nobody knows. Nobody's the wiser. The thing about
Demons come in, do you say?
they're deviants. The deviants come
Oh,
in.
deviant.
Deviants come in.
Yeah.
So I think what the fascination for vampires, I think there's something about the fact that they can enchant you. There's the infamous how they suck your blood, and I don't know. There's always this mystique about vampires. Now, great,
Yeah, the seduction of evil. I
but
see.
here's
Yeah.
the thing about it though is I don't like if you're gonna give me a vampire story and it's gonna be bloody and gory and scary. No.
Yeah.
But if you give me a vampire story that's got some romance or something to it, okay. There's
It's
Fright Night.
based on romance. Yeah, yeah.
Do you remember the original Fright Night with Roddy McDowell?
No,
Okay, it was a campy, cheesy '80s movie.
sounds great.
The sci-fi is really bad. Everything is over the top.
Yeah.
Well, they redid it in the 2000s. David Tennant's in it, which is fine. But they totally changed it, and now it's a scary horror movie.
Okay.
So
I was met a really nice young lady. Where was it? I was at we were at a conference or somewhere. Oh yeah, she was just a waitress working with us, and we fell chatting. And she was totally into horror. It was at a fantasy conference, and I
okay.
said it scares me. I don't like. She says, "Oh, all my tattoos." I mean, she was a nice, bright, bouncy kid, full of beans, and you said all her things are in tribute to different horror films, and she loves the genre. I said, it scares the crap out of me. So, well, that's why I love it. So you mustn't have ideas from the outside about what a particular fan group likes from the inside. For example, our daughter took me to see a Nordic heavy metal band, Amon Amarth. And you think, well, all these terrifying looking people, but they were so good natured. The band was so happy. I think Odin is with us tonight, and I'm drinking from his mead horn, and everyone clapping away and laughing, and the music being heavy and thrashy and silly, and it was just a lovely feeling.
Hmm.
So, once you get over the threshold into another little circle, as it were, you find, oh, my expectations are not all the same. I tell you what I did love was Wednesday. Did you see that?
I did not. That's the one channel I do not have is Netflix, and
Oh.
I keep meaning to look at it because I've told it's great, but yeah, I haven't.
Well, I mean, you see, that's Gothic. That's Gothic camp. It's not Gothic horror. So
Right.
they take the tropes of the Addams family. Wednesday, the awkward little girl from that goes off to boarding school, and it's the Edgar Allan, what's the not the Nevermore Academy, which is a Gothic pile in obviously up in New England. Actually, it's rebuilt in Romania, but don't tell anyone. And it's just a beautiful school series. Tim Burton created it. The girl who plays the lead is amazing. Uh, Catherine Zeta-Jones as Morticia as the time of her life, camping it up. No, just great and beautifully written. But it has scary elements. But because it's gothic and campy-ish, didn't bother me. If it had been on the nose horror, it wouldn't have worked for me.
No, I get where you're at because my husband would watch Walking Dead, and that was the one thing about Game of Thrones with all the zombies. Basically, I'm like, if I wanted to watch zombies, I would have watched Walking Dead. I don't like zombies, not my thing. However, you give me Shaun of the Dead or Zombieland, where you have some comedy with it, sure,
But
I'll watch it all day long.
But that's what good writing is. It's light and shade. The
Hmm.
cross-hatching of the comedy with the camp, with the scariness, gives you three
Hmm.
dimensions. If you just do it straight on the nose, you just got one thing. And that'll appeal to the hardcore fans, but for the rest of us, there's something missing. That's why Hitchcock was so good. He'd give you comedy and then terror. He'd
Hmm.
scare the crap out of you, then give you a laugh and a time to recover. And then he'd do it again. He knew enough not to cry, scare and scare and scare, because that's the law of diminishing returns. You have to have variety.
Well, and I want to say one thing. Okay, every this movie is very old, and it's everybody knows now, and it's just ridiculous. But Blair Witch Project. Okay, I don't like horror. My friend, I went to dinner with one of my friends, and she's like, "Let's go to the midnight show." I'm like, "I don't want to go see this movie." She's
Yeah.
like, "No, we're gonna go see it." I'm like, "I really don't want to go see it." She's like, "Oh, come on." So I did. I acquiesced, and I said, "Okay, I'll go see it." I sat there most of the movie theater, most of the movie like this, trying to cover my eyes. Okay.
That's me. Yeah.
And then yeah, I see the eyeballs that are there, and I'm like, okay. And then I didn't really watch the whole movie. So yeah, my after the eyeballs, that was it. I was just done.
I didn't see it for the same reason. I'm just not interested in being frightened.
But the thing is, and this is what I will attribute what they did because they never showed you. And I lived not too far. You had to drive through the woods to get to my house, or a forest preserve. Is because they didn't show you what happened and because I didn't watch it. I had nightmares that night. I literally had nightmares of something coming after me that I couldn't place because that was placed in my head. this is why I stay away from horror.
Thank you, film. That's what you paid your $15 for, or whatever it was, to have a miserable night's sleep. No,
Yeah,
not for me.
no, I don't do that anymore. It's not my thing. It's not my bag.
But why
Um,
should we all be the same? Why should we all have the same tastes? I mean,
no.
part of the film, fun of seeing any film is going with your mates, and then you all go to the pub afterwards and argue about it. And it's amazing how often you've seen different films and you have different opinions about it. And uh, yeah, that's who we are. We're all different,
Well, and
and
it's like your book will appeal to a lot of people, and then some people won't get your book. But it's like when I try to explain to people that don't really have a background in video games, it's like life is really like a video game. You get to the big boss, you think, okay, I've overcome all this, life is good. Oh no, wait a second, we got some more stuff for you, and then you gotta have to face a big boss again. And people that have never played a video game in their life have no concept of what I'm talking about. But
well, it's all built on the same culture. I mean, video gamers didn't invent the world from nothing. They
no,
reinterpreted it with their amazing designs and with their characters and with everything they've given us that has been so great, that has certainly inspired me to move away from video games and write narrative. It's we're all plowing the same fields that they were plowing back Beowulf and A Thousand and One Nights and Gilgamesh, all throughout our combined cultural history,
yeah.
and much of which is fantasy fiction, by the way. Uh, you know, those three I mentioned, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Beowulf has a dragon and a hoard of gold and orcs. Yeah, it's we're all planning. We're all products of the others. I was once in the room with Charles Aznavour, and someone asked him what his influences were, and he said, "We're all. It is impossible for anyone to emerge fully formed from the forest. We're all products of the others." I thought that was just very
True.
insightful.
It's very true. So, is there anything that we have not discussed that you would like to add?
No, I mean, not really. I could go on forever. It's been very nice the way that this fantasy and speculative fiction uh, community have taken to the books. It's been really nice. I know it's bad form to quote your reviews, but there was a sci-fi reviewer and an author himself who coined a new term for my books. He said they're fantasy.
Nice.
Because of my background in comedy writing, he thought when he read, he thought it was going to be like a spoof or taking the Mickey out of it. And he said nothing could be further from the truth. They're proper adventures, but a lot of fun happens along the way that you laugh out loud, and then you're off having the adventures again. So um, no, so fantasy. It's been just very nice to get all this feedback from our group. When you go to the conventions and people tell you how much they enjoyed it, it's really you can't thank people enough for that feedback.
No. And I think that's what people don't understand about reviews. Are like, reviews are not for authors. Reviews are for authors though in a way because it teaches how to become better writers, and it teaches us that the people that actually want to read our stuff.
Yeah, and I've had some wonderfully bad reviews in my time for things I've written, some of which I'm happy to quote some if you like, but that you just got to say, well, if you're prepared to put your nose over the parapet, like our daughter there, that's an artwork by my wife. I think I was on the day of her prom with a haircut. Yeah, she had a fancy haircut
Okay.
done. And then Jenny laid her on the ground and took that photograph and did. But if you get your nose over the parapet, if you're prepared to put your head above there, just be prepared you're going to be shot at.
Yeah,
People are going to throw coconuts as well as roses. And it's often because they might not read very well, or it's often because whatever you've written is dreadful. Uh, you just got to be prepared to take whatever comes your way. And if
exactly.
it's going to put you off, well, then probably the world has been saved another bad book by another mediocre writer.
It's possibly. I thank you, Richard.
Well, thank you, Dawn. It's been fun.
I always like talking to Richard. Yes, this is the second time, so it's not like it's a lot of times, but last year after the interview, we had tentatively talked about him coming back this year. And well, he did. And I have to say that it did not disappoint. And we have tentatively talked about when the next book comes out, he'll be back. So I hope you guys enjoy his tales. And if you're a writer, you understand that there's a process. And if you're not, that's okay too. But I think the conversation overall, when we're talking about different things, it just it's a conversation, and that's one of the things that makes this job great, is because you get to talk to people out of different realms and different about different things. Would you imagine that, yes, both of us really hate horror flicks? Well, give us some comedy with it and it's okay, but that doesn't knock anything else. That the person that loves horror, the person that loves a romance novel, the person that loves, you know, anything that isn't necessarily what you like, this opens you up. This branches you into a whole new world. I remember when I got together with my husband absolutely loves Smallville, and I never watched it. Did not didn't watch it, didn't care to watch it. And it wasn't that I didn't like superheroes, it was just not my thing. So, of course, when you start to become coupled and you start hanging out, and you know, he wanted to watch Smallville and I got into watching Smallville, and Michael Rosenbaum as Lex Luthor was awesome, and I enjoyed it. And so it was something that it was a gift that he gave me. Now, as we talked about when it was Walking Dead, I'm going to go right. I'm going to go do something else because I don't want all that. So there's certain things that when we're with the partner, when we're with friends, we will share with. I've never seen Love Actually. My friend, we were celebrating Christmas, and they're like, "You need to watch this movie." She had been telling me that I need to see it for a while, and I'm just like, "Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah." And I made her watch something that she didn't particularly want to watch either, but she enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, and that's the joy of expanding horizons. And I think we've lost a little bit of that with the instantaneous 15-minute or 5-minute reels, because you don't have the cooler talk of, did you see that? Because we have so much content, we're not forced to all watch the same thing. Now, mind you, there are still some shows that get that traction and that build up, but it's all a process now of finding those little nuggets and connecting with your friends so you can share those moments, you can share those things. So I would recommend going out and getting Richard's books, because I think they're good. I think they're a wild ride. I have not read them yet, and I most likely will be picking up a copy myself because they do seem like something I would enjoy. Fun to see, as he said. Sounds like something that would be a great escape for most of us. Anyway, so if that's my spiel for today. If you would like to be a guest on the show, send me email to Donna, Dauna, at better2podcast.com. That's Donna at better2podcast.com. And, well, whenever you're listening, I do appreciate you listening. I'd like to thank Rich Zai from Third Ear Audio for the audio production. I'd like to thank Fast Susie for the music. I am still getting set up from the new studio, from the move, so sometimes the things are not just flowing. So season 9 is kind of like re-getting re-getting comfortable, which doesn't make any sense, but it's about reestablishing myself and getting comfortable doing this again. While I love it, I took some time off, and so it's like getting back into the flow is still happening. But anyway, like I said, I hope you guys enjoy the show still. If you want, leave me a comment. That's great. Leave a review. Tell your friends. We're trying to grow the show this season. And, I greatly appreciate you guys. I really do. So on that note, whenever you listen, whether it be morning, noon, night, whenever, thank you. And I'll catch you next time, guys. Bye.